Hello everybody and welcome to chapter 22 of the book of Shemot as we continue to travel through Tanach. Chapter 22 has 30 verses and it starts in the Koren Sachs Chumash on page 516 and 517. This chapter continues to list several mitzvot and several laws pertaining to how to build a just and robust society. And just like chapter 21, it covers a lot of different topics. So before we get into the verses of this chapter, it's worth stepping back, because the chapter can feel like a long list of unrelated laws, but actually there is some structure to it. There's a clear progression, and once we see it, the whole chapter starts to make a bit more sense. The beginning of the chapter continues to talk about theft. We had dealt with the most direct case. If you take something that isn't yours, you have to repay it, and that can mean paying back 4 or 5 times the value. Now the Torah immediately adds complexity. What if the thief breaks in at night? What if he's killed in the process? Now we're not just talking about property, we're talking about fear, self-defense, and human instinct. Already the Torah is moving from simple law into real life. From there the Torah shifts slightly, still in the world of property, but now to damage that isn't intentional. Your animal wanders into someone else's field. You light a fire and it spreads. You didn't mean to cause harm, but you did. And the Torah introduces a key idea. You are responsible not only for what you do, but for what you set in motion as well. And then the focus shifts again to something even more subtle. What if I didn't damage your property, but you gave it to me to look after? And this is where we encounter the concept of a shomer, a guardian. And here the Torah builds an entire system of responsibility based on relationship. There are 4 types of guardians, and each one carries a different level of responsibility. First, the shomer chinam, an unpaid guardian. They're doing you a favor. So they are only responsible if they were negligent. If something beyond their control happens, like theft or loss, they are not liable. Next we have the shomer sachar, a paid guardian. Now it's a job, not a favor. So their responsibility increases. They are liable not only for negligence, but also for theft and loss, unless it's a true, unavoidable accident. The third type is a socher, someone who rents an item. They benefit from it, so they are generally treated like a paid guardian, also responsible for theft and loss, but exempt in extreme cases. And finally, we have the shoel, a borrower. They get the full benefit for free. So the Torah actually places the highest level of responsibility on them. They are liable for almost everything, even accidents, with only very limited exceptions. What emerges is a powerful principle. The more you benefit, the more responsibility you carry. And then just when we think we're still talking about property, the Torah shifts again, but now to people. And the case of seduction is about taking something that can't simply be returned. And the Torah responds in the same language: responsibility, accountability, and consequence. From there, the Torah zooms out even further, and we encounter core prohibitions of sorcery, bestiality, and idolatry. These aren't just civil laws, they define the moral and spiritual boundaries of the world that we're building. And then comes the emotional heart of the chapter. The Torah turns to the most vulnerable, the convert, the widow, and the orphan. And here the tone shifts. This is no longer just law, it's almost a plea. Hashem says, do not oppress them, because if they cry out, I will hear. After all the systems and categories, the Torah reminds us, justice without compassion is not enough. And finally, the chapter brings everything into daily life: how you lend money, how you treat someone who owes you, and how you treat their belongings. And so we see that the chapter progresses from what you take, to what you damage, to what you're entrusted with, to how you affect others, to the moral world you live in, and to how you treat the most vulnerable people within it. In this chapter, there are 19 mitzvot, 8 of which are positive mitzvot, and 11 which are negative mitzvot. So with that in mind, let's turn to chapter 22, verse 1, and bearing in mind that this verse appears within the same structural paragraph as the last verse of chapter 21, which was talking about theft. We had said in that verse that if a man shall steal an ox or a sheep or a goat and slaughter it or sell it, he shall pay 5 cattle in place of the ox and 4 sheep in place of the sheep. Now, the verse continues here with verse 1 of chapter 22. Im b'machteres yimatzeh haganav, if a burglar is caught tunneling in, v'huka v'mes, and is struck and is killed, ein lo damin, there is no blood guilt on his account. Verse 2, Im zarcha hashemesh alav, but if the sun has risen on him, damim lo, then there is blood guilt on his account, shalem yishalem, he must make restitution, im ein lo v'nimkar b'gnei vaso, and if he lacks the means, he shall be sold as a slave to repay his debt. And the key difference here is based around whether he is making his theft at night, when he would not hesitate to kill anyone who catches him in the act, in which case there is no blood guilt, or if he was so brazen as to do it during the day, in which case he probably wouldn't kill anyone that gets in his way, in which case there would be some responsibility. Verse 3, Im himatzei simatzei v'yado hagnevar, if what he stole is found in his possession, mishor ad chamor ad seh chayim, whether a live ox or donkey or sheep or goat, shenai mishalem, he shall pay double. Verse 4, Ki yaver ish sadeh or cherem, if a man permits livestock to devour a field or vineyard, v'shilach es be'iro, uvier b'ster acher, whether he set loose his livestock, or he grazed it in another's field, meitav sadehu umeitav karmo yishalem, then he must repay using the best of his field or vineyard. And what we see again and again with these different punishments is that the Torah is purposely penalizing in order to act as a deterrent to people from committing these acts. Verse 5, Ki seitze eish, if a fire is started, umatza kotzim, and it spreads to thorns, v'ne'echal gadish, or hakama, or hasadeh, and grain is destroyed, stacked, or standing, or growing in the field, shalem yishalem hamavir es ha'be'era, then the person who started the fire must pay back for the damage. As we reach verse 6, we now turn to talking about the laws of the shomer, of the guardian. Verse 6, Ki yitain ish el reyehu kesef o chelim lishmor, if a person shall give money, or vessels, or goods to his fellow to safeguard, v'gunav mebeis ha'ish, and it is stolen from the house of that person, im yimatzeh haganav yishalem shnayim, if the thief is found, he shall pay double. Verse 7, Im lo yimatzeh haganav, if the thief is not found, v'nikrav balabayis el ha'elohim, then the householder shall approach the court, im lo shalach yado b'mleches reyehu, and must swear before the court that he has not laid hands on his neighbor's goods himself. Verse 8, Al kol dvar pesha, in every case of betrayal of trust, al shor, al chamor, al seh, whether concerning an ox, a donkey, or sheep, al salma, on clothing, al kol aveda, on any loss, asher yomar ki hu zeh, that one can point to and say, this is it, ad ha'elohim yavo dvar shnehem, both parties' claims shall be brought to the court, asher yashiyun Elohim yishalem shnaim l'reyehu, and whomever the court finds guilty shall pay double to the other. Verse 9, Ki yitain ish el reyehu, if one person entrusts another, chamor with a donkey, or shor, or with an ox, or seh, or with a sheep, v'chol behema, or any animal, lishmor, for safekeeping, umeis, and it dies, on nishbar, or it gets injured, on nishbar ein ro'eh, or is looted without an eyewitness. Verse 10, Shavuas Adonai tihiyeh ben shnehem, then an oath before Hashem shall settle the matter between them. Im lo shalach yado b'mleches reyehu, if the second man swears that he did not lay his hand on the property of his fellow, v'lakach ba'alav v'lo yishalem, then the owner must accept this, and the second man does not need to pay. Verse 11, V'im ganov yiganev me'imo, but if it was stolen from him, yishalem livalav, then he must pay back the owner. And verse 12, V'im tarof yitareif, and if it was torn to death by a wild animal, yivyehu aid, then the guardian shall produce a witness, or can bring the remains as evidence, hatrefa lo yishalem, and for a torn animal, he does not pay. Verse 13, talking about a borrower, V'chi yishal ish me'im reyehu, if a person borrows from his fellow, v'nishbar or mace, and it is injured, becomes broken, or dies, ba'alav einimo, while the owner is not there, shalem yishalem, then he surely has to pay back. Verse 14, in ba'alav imo, but if the owner was with him, lo yishalem, then he does not need to pay the restitution. Im sachirhu ba bischaro. If the animal was hired, only the hiring fee is due. As we reach verse 15 now, the Torah shifts from speaking about property to speaking about people. And it's worth pausing for a moment to speak about this because it's probably a topic that can feel particularly difficult to relate to. We're going to be talking about the case of seduction. The Torah describes a situation where a man persuades an unmarried young woman to be intimate with him, and the outcome is that he is required to marry her, or if the father refuses, then he has to pay compensation. And for a modern listener, this raises a lot of questions. Where is the woman's voice in all of this? Why is the father involved? Why is marriage even being proposed as part of the solution? So to understand this, we need to step into the world of the Torah for a moment. In an ancient context, a woman's social and economic security was very closely tied to marriage. There wasn't an independent financial system where she could easily support herself. There were no careers in the modern sense, no safety nets, and no social services. So a decision to be intimate with a man was not just a personal or emotional experience. It had long-term consequences for her future, including her prospects of marriage and stability. So in a case where she has been seduced, what the Torah is doing here is not romanticizing the situation, it's actually taking it extremely seriously. The man cannot simply walk away. He is held accountable in one of two ways. Either he marries her and takes on full lifelong responsibility, or, if that's not appropriate, and importantly, there is a right to refuse by the father or the girl herself, then he must still pay compensation. And that's really quite crucial for understanding what's going on here. The father's role here is not about ownership. It reflects the reality that he is responsible for her welfare and future within that society. But it does involve her consent as well. This is not a forced marriage by any stretch of the imagination. And clearly she wouldn't be in this situation if she hadn't consented. And so if the situation is not in her best interest, then it doesn't go ahead. So the Torah here is trying to set a very strong principle. You cannot create emotional, social, or physical consequences for another person and then walk away. There must be responsibility. And that's actually very forward thinking, considering we're talking about a Torah that was presented to the Jewish people over 3,000 years ago. If we look at the way that society operates today, it's very much geared towards personal autonomy over what kind of relationships people get into. And it certainly doesn't create any lasting accountability or responsibility. So actually, the Torah is being very forward-thinking with this issue. With that in mind, let's turn to verse 15. V'chi ish basula asher lo arasa v'shachav ima. If a man shall seduce a virgin girl who is not betrothed, and he lies with her, mahor yimharena lo leisha, then he shall provide her with a marriage contract as his wife. Verse 16. Imma'ain yima'ain aviha lesita lo. If her father refuses to give her to him, and our rabbis point out that this double usage of the word ma'ain indicates that the girl is also being given the opportunity to refuse, then the verse says, Kesef yishkol kamohar habasulos. Then he must still pay out the full price of a marriage contract intended for a virgin, which is worth more than the amount that would be given to someone who had lost their virginity. And now we seem to move into a strange direction with verse 17. Mechashefa lo sechayeh. The Torah tells us that you shall not permit a witch to live. Verse 18. Kol shochev im behema mos yumas. Anyone who lies with an animal, who is intimate with an animal, shall surely be put to death. Verse 19. Zoveach le'elohim yacharam. Whoever sacrifices to any other deity shall be utterly destroyed. Bilti ladonai levado. Only to Hashem alone. And perhaps what the verses are doing over here is indicating to us the kind of mindsets that can lead a person to deviate from pursuing an intimate relationship in the appropriate and correct way. And so perhaps the Torah is drawing our attention to the fact that people can become almost bewitched with their infatuation that they may feel for someone and the chemistry that would then push them towards becoming intimate outside of the regular framework for being able to do so. Perhaps the Torah is also drawing our attention to the animalistic urges and impulses that people act on, when they choose to become intimate outside of the Torah framework. And perhaps as well there's the distraction to recognizing the importance and the beauty and the sanctity of pursuing relationships in the appropriate format. And so perhaps that's one of the reasons why we see this prohibition about witchcraft, this prohibition about bestiality, and this prohibition about worshipping other gods. As we reach verse 20 now, we change focus again to cautioning about the sensitivity that is required to people who are helpless or abandoned. Verse 20, V'ger lo soneh v'lo silchatzenu. Do not taunt or exploit or oppress a stranger. Ki gerim hayisem be'eretz Mitzrayim. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Verse 21, Kol almana v'yasam lo sa'anun. Do not abuse a widow or an orphan. Verse 22, Imanei sa'neoso. For if you do abuse them, ki im sa'ok yitzak elai. If they cry out to me, shamoa eshma tza'akaso. I will unquestionably heed their cry. Verse 23, V'char api. And my anger will flare. V'haragti eschem becharev. And I will kill you by the sword. V'hayu neshechem almanos u'v'neichem yesomim. And then your wives will be widows and your children orphans. Verse 24, Im kesef talveh esami. If you lend money to one of my people, esa'ani imach, to the poor person amongst you, lo sihiyeh lo kenosher. Then do not act with him as a harsh creditor. Lo sesimun alav neshech. And do not charge him interest. Verse 25, Im chavol tachbol samas reyecha. If you take your fellow's garment as collateral, adbo hashemesh teshivenu lo. Then return it to him before the sun sets. Verse 26, Ki hi chesuso levadahi. Because it is his only clothing, simlaso lo'oro, the only covering for his skin, b'mei yishgav. What else does he have to sleep with? V'hayak yitzak elai. And if he cries out to me, v'shomati ki chanun ani. Then I will be listening, for I am compassionate. And within this is a reminder that we have to pay people on time, because we never know if the money that they are waiting for from you is necessary for their upkeep and survival. Verse 27, Elohim lo sikalel, which may mean you shall not revile God, or may mean do not curse a judge. V'nasiv amacha lo sa'or, and do not curse or deride a leader of your people. Verse 28, Meleyasacha v'dim'acha lo sa'acher, do not delay offerings from your harvest of grain or wine. B'chor banecha titen li, and the firstborn of your sons you must give to me, which we've already talked about in the context of Pidyon Haben, of redeeming the firstborn. Verse 29, Kein ta'aseh l'sharcha le'tzonecha, so shall you do to your ox and sheep. Shivas yamim yihiyeh imimo, let them stay with their mothers for 7 days. Bayom hashmini titno li, and on the 8th day you give these oxen or sheep over to me. And finally, verse 30, V'anshe kodesh tihiyun li, you are to be my holy people. Uvasab sadeh treifa lo sochelu, do not eat flesh torn by beasts in the wild. La kelev tashlichu noso, instead throw it to the dogs. And our rabbis point out that this commandment of throwing torn flesh to the dogs is in some way a reward for the fact that the dogs of Egypt did not bark when the Israelites were coming out of Egypt, and so they are being remembered further down the line by Hashem. So that's all for chapter 22. I look forward to learning chapter 23 with you. In the meantime, have a wonderful and meaningful day.